I really need people to understand what's happening here with this video. And that is, we have so-called independent media who is pushing for Joe Biden, the corporate candidate. Do we understand like what exactly is happening here? And we can start there.
Or whatever other probably to
Yes.
that, of making this argument of the lesser of two evils, I would be open to the idea that, okay, this is the last one. Donald Trump, fine. He tried to steal the election, fine. That is a new line that he has crossed. But absent an acknowledgement that we are creating our own destiny by lowering the bar in these ways, I'm not comfortable coming out and criticizing anybody who no longer wants to be complicit in that kind of a system that's enabled the Democratic Party to not have a primary, treat Marianne Williamson as badly as they've treated her, treat Bernie Sanders as badly as they treated him.
Can you pause it
come
there?
Out and say they don't have.
This is a good point that Bree makes, but this is the point that I want to make, and that is, this has to be a very weird position that Kyle and Krystal are in, where their number one candidate is Marianne Williamson, while at the same time they have to advocate for Joe Biden, the candidate that's refusing to debate Marianne Williamson. You see what I'm saying? So this is where, to me, my critique of some in the professional managerial class is that since the policy beliefs that we're talking about, let's say Medicare for all, for example, isn't something they need to have, they can be flexible of their opinion. They can be flexible. Oh, yeah, Joe Biden this time. Oh, Marianne Williamson this time, because whether or not the policy becomes actual law isn't relevant to them. Like, it's either or, it's not relevant at all whether Medicare for all it's more of a thing of, I'm a good person, so I want everybody to have Medicare for all. And that's why I want Medicare for all. Not necessarily because I need Medicare for all, but because you're not dependent on that policy, you have the ability to go back and forth. You have the ability to go, well, Joe Biden's not that bad, and this is the reason why he's not that bad. So that's what I wanted to put in here. Unless anybody else wanted to chime in, you can go back to the video.
I'm gonna chime in here for a second, just before we start off, because I think that this kind of goes back to the conversation that we were having before about strategy versus how we move on the left, and on the part of Krystal and Kyle, even if I were to intellectually be able to come to a place where I understand the arguments that they're making, in terms of pure strategy, if you are a leftist, I think this is terrible strategy to say to Joe Biden, well, you're going to get my vote regardless, so there's nothing you need to do for me. You're going to get my vote no matter what you do. And so if they are really on the independent left, it doesn't make any sense for them to just come out and say, well, you already have my vote, there's nothing for you to do anymore. I think that we need, if the argument was truly to push Joe Biden to the left, even if you don't take that argument seriously, the only way you're going to push him to the left is by threatening something. In this case, threatening to withhold your vote. If there's nothing for you to withhold from Biden, what reason does he have to change anything at all? And so going back to the conversation we were having earlier, even if I were to say, like, okay, well, maybe if you're in a swing state and you're really that afraid of Trump and you're willing to make that choice of the lesser of two evils, even if you can intellectually get yourself to that place, at this point in the race, that's just bad strategy. It's like you're going on a date with somebody, but you already know going to this date, they're going to give it up at the end of the day, no matter what. What type of date are you going to take them on? Are you going to take them somewhere nice? Are you going to bring your own? You're not going to do anything because you know at the end of the day, the case is sealed. So that's sort of the way that I see this playing out. Krystal and Kyle already said, well, Joe Biden, I'm going home with you at the end of the day. So there's nothing you need to do for me.
That's a freaking awesome analogy because it perfectly encapsulates what they're doing, how they're giving away their leverage in that analogy. But go ahead, anybody else wanted to chime in?
I'm sorry, CJ. I got this classic video real quick. It's only 1 minute.
Yeah, insert it, sir.
If
Yeah,
you
there
want
we
to
go. I know
pull
this one.
The party, the major party that is closest to the way you're thinking, to what you're thinking, you must show them that you're capable of not voting for them.
Because the way the Democratic Party is run now for quite a number of presidential cycles is they pick a nominee in a kind of half-assed process that doesn't really represent much of anybody, and then they tell everybody to just shut up. Don't bring up anything that will complicate life for your nominee. You know he's not for you on this. Why badger him? He's not going to be for you for reasons that you don't understand but are good reasons. Shut up. Turn off your brains.
If you don't show them you're capable of not voting for them, they don't have to listen to you. I promise you that. I worked within the Democratic Party. I didn't listen or have to listen to anything on the left while I was working in the Democratic Party because the left had nowhere to go.
100%. So I just wanted to share that.
I wonder what capacity. I always wonder what capacity was Lawrence talking about here. Like, who was he working for where he was able to let this cat out of the bag, sort of thing? Like, what was he doing? And that's still, I haven't been able to figure that out, but we can get to the video.
I believe he worked in the Senate. Like, he was a congressional operative for some senator, I believe. I would have to I don't want to spend
it was a big senator.
Yeah,
I do remember it was a big senator. I know at the time he's making this comment, he wasn't working for that senator. I was wondering what was he, and he wasn't working for MSNBC. What was he doing in order to make him feel free enough to even say that? Because he won't say that now, and he wouldn't have said that while working for the Senate. But go ahead, Case, if you want to play the video.
Yeah, let's go back to the video.
Have to hold a free, fair election. The DNC argued that in court. You know?
So let me explain a little bit of my position. I think that'll help respond to some of what you said there. And I'm also curious to dig in a little bit more to your analysis of how the Biden administration has actually been in reality. So last election in 2020, I did live in a swing state. I lived in Virginia, still live in Virginia, registered in Virginia. And it did not feel good to vote for Joe Biden, but I decided to vote for Joe Biden, which is something I said publicly at the time. But I said something very similar to you, which is like, listen, this was not easy for me. If you, wherever you live, swing state, not swing state, et cetera, you do whatever you analyze is the right thing to do. And the reason that I voted for him primarily at that time, even though I thought he had an atrocious record in the Senate, even though, you know, complicit in the Iraq War, complicit in bad trade deals, complicit, you know.
What I would say is that with this sort of thinking that Kyle and Krystal are going to be talking about, what's different than voting for a Republican? What is tangibly if you can vote, if you're voting for somebody who doesn't believe that you should have Medicare for all, if you're voting for somebody who doesn't believe to end qualified, you know, whatever your issues are, if you're voting for them regardless, what would be different than voting for a Republican who also doesn't hold your beliefs? Like, what? That's what I don't get. Like, what is the difference? Go ahead, bro.
They're using terror tactics, for lack of a better word. They're saying that anything on the Republican side is so awful and fascist, and it'll create ruin in the country and in the world. Therefore you have to vote for the Democrats because the stakes are so high. So to me, it's a terror tactic. And I every time I hear it, my instinct is to be like, screw you. I'm not doing what you're.
Yeah.
I'm not going to play that. I'm not going to be terrorized into who I vote for.
And if anything, it should be the other way around. It should be the other way around. We should be terrorizing the politicians to vote the way we want them to, not the other way around.
Yes. I was just thinking,
spot on.
What if Cornel West cut an ad, and this is for my consultant friend Brooke. He cut an ad where you take this clip of Lawrence O'Donnell and just repeat it a couple times. The left has nowhere to go. The left has no, trust me, the left has nowhere to go. And then Cornel West just pops up on the screen. I'm here. Boom.
That's a
And
great
then-
idea. I would love
you
to
know?
see him do it. I would love to see anybody do that
Yeah,
who is
anybody.
outside of this whole, blob bubble that everyone is in.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That I think these two are in. Kyle and Krystal sound to me like people who have been consumed in the blob.
Mm-hmm. 100%.
It does. I have the same sort of critique because it's like you have to be in a bubble. You almost have to be in a bubble to say what they're saying here.
Mhm.
There's no way you can be experiencing quote unquote Bidenomics and have this sort of critique. You have to be insulated from it.
I think you're being too kind. You're being too kind because Krystal Ball has a video from a couple of years ago where she makes the most articulate case. She was speaking to Bernie at the time of what we're talking about against Krystal Ball today. So it was such a level of detail making our case why Cornel West should run. I can only conclude she doesn't know that money and incentives are really what's going on here. That's my only conclusion.
I agree.
You can continue, Case.
All right.
Like terrible things on crime, all that stuff, right? The primary reason I voted for him was because of the National Labor Relations Board and because labor politics and building out union power in this country, to me, is one of the most important goals and something that I think we all share and leftists generally believe. Now, in retrospect, not only do I feel good about that vote, he's actually surprised me. Now, I've got all kinds of issues, right? On the National Labor Relations Board, though, specifically, they just issued a ruling which could be a complete game changer for unions. And just to explain to people a little bit, basically, in the past, bosses could union bust with impunity, no accountability. Now, the process going forward is completely changed. If bosses are caught union busting, then that's it. There's no more election. It's canceled. They have to recognize the union and start bargaining with them. That's the biggest shift in labor relations we've had in our lifetime. So that's why at this point, I'm not only, it's likely I'm a Marianne supporter as well, but we can all see the most likely outcome is it's going to be Trump versus Biden. Not only would I say that protecting the Biden National Labor Relations Board isn't important enough for me to vote for Joe Biden, but it is important enough that I would actively encourage, but I'm not going to shame them for whatever they decide to do, but I would actively encourage people who are in a swing state to vote for Joe Biden, if for no other reason than to protect that board.
So I think that's a perfectly defensible position. And I had this conversation on my podcast in the last episode, and there were people who would characterize that position as, you've heard the thing, you've been on the internet, being too credulous about Biden or, being too comfortable in one's own position in life and not needing enough change and being happy with the status quo. People will say things like that. I think actually that if your priority, if you believe the path to meaningful change is going to primarily come through a kind of, I don't say this dismissively, but a kind of labor incrementalism, meaning there are meaningful labor gains that happen, but are not the type of which would radically transform the system the way that some people want to happen in a shorter term. And the way that some people might argue Bernie Sanders represented his movement as the goal of being, then that's a defensible position. But I have to hold space for the reality that there are people for whom, even as significant as those labor gains are, it's simply insufficient. And what they see when they look at the trajectory of the last 50, 60 years of Democratic Party politics, when they read Listen Liberal and see the longer game the Democratic Party making a concerted choice to back away from labor in a way that has gone on for decades and isn't necessarily turning around as a consequence of Joe Biden having some good NLRB appointments.
So let me actually,
and then I want to jump into it.
So number one, I don't think that in massively increasing union density, I actually don't see that as incremental change. If you look at the chart of the decline in the middle class,
and we're gonna end it here. This is the part that I wanted to hear, and because and Bree answers this NLRB sort of argument perfectly. this is not enough. That's simply not enough. That's simply not enough. You showed up to buy a $20,000 car and you have $100. Sorry, that's not enough money to get what you want to get. And this is the critique that of the professional managerial class that I've had. You always overblow what Joe Biden has done good, and you always underwhelm what Joe Biden does bad. And that's what we're seeing here. Are we really to make election decisions off of the NLRB? Is that serious? That's what we might. Is that even serious? So this is the professional managerial's calculation. Yeah, we got a little nuclear war, but we got that NLRB. You know what I'm saying? It's so ridiculous. And then my other sort of analysis of this is, let's sort of take what she's saying for face value. Oh, union density is up. Are you talking about the union density that sells out their for rank and file all the time? The union density that's in bed with the Democratic Party? What are you talking about? Like, Krystal Ball? Like, this is not good at all the way around the board. That's my take. We'll get everybody's take of this, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up. I meant for this to go about 2.5 hours, and I think we're roughly at about 2.5 hours. So that's my take. Let's start with Brooke, ladies first, and then we'll go to Hector, and then we'll go to Chuck, and we'll end with Case there.
Well, that is a beautiful take, and I'm going to build off of that, because I think what Krystal did was she tipped her hand that they get money from unions. I think that, as an insider, I know how this shit goes. I know how money gets played, and that kind of influence is going to influence what you say, what people say on camera. And I think that pulling the NLRB and union density out of a world where we're facing World War III, a land war in Asia, is the most ridiculous thing if that wasn't bought out, if that isn't SEIU money pushing that message, then they're even more bigger dumbasses than I thought they were. Oh, look, it's we've been joined. There's a new person.
What up, Jay?
Hey, Jay.
And that's JB. What's up, JB? How you doing, sir? Is he frozen?
Hey.
Oh, no, there you go. There you go. Now we can see you.
Yeah, good to see you guys. I just was listening in. I wanted to add just a little bit to the conversation. I have an analogy. Now, everybody knows that I always have analogies.
He's known for these. Yeah, he's known for these.
Yeah. So here's the thing I wanted to point out. Let's say hypothetically you go to a banquet hall, and in that banquet hall, you're sitting there. There is a banquet table full of food, and this banquet table gets eaten up by the very few people that are there at the table, but there's some crumbs left. If you are full crumb, if you serve those people who are full crumbs, are they still satisfied? You just merely top them off, right? But those of us who come into that banquet hall that are starving, we're hungry, and you try to give us crumbs, how is that going to satisfy our needs? Mm-hmm. It's the exact same thing when you come to the opinions of privileged people like Krystal and Kyle, Sam, Cenk, Anna, and everybody else. Is the exact same thing. They're full. They've had their fill already in a socioeconomic status. The rest of us are sitting here with our tummies grumbling. And then you say, here's a cracker. Here's some crumbs. There you go. That's good enough. We're all full, aren't we? But no, we're not.
That's a great
because
example.
Here I am, sitting here, literally on my account with $10 to my name, with other bills coming, as a disabled person that is living in damn near poverty. And yet I hear, well, everything's good. Biden's doing this. By the way, as a disabled person that's not working right now, how is the union going to help me?
Mm-hmm.
So this is the point I think that they really need to get. There is an out of touch mentality that they're saying, well, things are going okay. And there's this point where they are now have become the incrementalists that they have demonized years ago. And so when it comes to listening to the voices of the people who are the most marginalized among them, they've actually went behind the gate, they've went into the suburbs, and now it's out of sight, out of mind. So now they're getting pissed off because they have a marginalized black woman that's sitting in front of them telling you, hey, wake up, you're wrong. And then they won't even mention our names, even though we were just in the Mediaite article. They won't even bother to mention our names and say, well, they may have a point. Maybe we need to uplift the most marginalized voices among us in order to be able to get out of here. Because the point is, whatever happens to us is eventually going to happen to them. The only reason why it hasn't happened to them yet is because they continue to put on blinders, earmuffs, because they're going. And so I think that's the point that I wanted to make, is that you need, in order, we are the canary in the coal mines, right? Especially black people. Sorry to white people, but we are the canary in the coal mines, because if they do it to us, they're going to do it to you. First, they're going to start off with the poor white people. Then they're going to go off to the white middle class, as we see going right now.
Right.
Ding, ding, ding. Important to listen to the most marginalized among us, and that's all I had to say.